Hello, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about how to actually succeed on your internship and getting this job offer. So thank you so much for being here. I think this is like a pretty good time to deal with this too, because like most people have summer internships and they're like, okay, well, that job offer is coming, right? Or that return offer. And they don't know like, okay, am I doing things right? Is there like still some things I can do to salvage like what my experience was? Maybe it's bad, maybe it's not, maybe they don't even know what they're doing is good or bad. So thank you so much for being here. And can you tell me a little bit like your situation? Do you currently have an internship that you're on right now and you're trying to see if you can get a return offer from that?
Yeah, sure. I am currently interning in Canada. I live in Canada, but it's a company that also exists in United States.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been there for 2 months, and I have one more month to go. Then I will be returning back to school. I think my situation might be a little bit different than everybody in terms of return offers, just because I am a rising junior and not a
Okay.
senior. But I was informed that at worst they could give me a return internship if I succeed at the beginning of my internship. So
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Okay. So if you do well on this internship experience, they'll give you another, like the junior to senior year summer, they'll give you another internship as well.
Yeah, that was what I was told at the beginning. Yeah.
Okay. And are you like one of many people that are having this situation right now, or you're one of like other rising seniors that are having this situation? You're the only one that is a little bit younger than the others.
Yeah. So at my location, there is only one other tech consultant intern,
Okay.
and he's rising senior.
Hmm.
But I know in the business team, business advising, business consulting team, there are people in my situation. And I
Okay.
know in other locations in Toronto, I believe there are some people who are like me too. So yeah, I think it's just two interns in my locations, but yeah, the company wide, it's a common thing.
Okay. All right. So in this case, like I think it's a slightly different situation, but it's
Hmm.
not completely different because
Hmm.
what they're looking for in a return offer is typically like, okay, would I actually like to have this person on a project? But I think on your situation, it's more about do you have the room to grow? Have you been growing during that time you're there? At least like that's my assumption from most people who
Hmm.
are, if they were to evaluate, because if you're a rising junior, there's still a lot to go. Like you can't be put on the same level as a rising senior just because
Hmm.
they need to kind of be ready for the job right away. But for you, they're going to be looking at potential. Have you been utilizing your potential? Have you been a good worker in some cases? Like, for example, are you networking? Are you learning as much as you can? Are you being professional? If you're not being professional, being late to class, or not class, being late to meetings, then that actually would be something like, okay, well, I know like probably you're going to learn about that eventually, but again they also do it during your time too. So you said you're 2 months in. If maybe like you messed something up in the beginning, and have you been fixing that over time? Like maybe if you been working on a PowerPoint slide and then there was like a feedback that you were given time and time again, have you been working on that feedback? So that's generally what I would be saying for your situation. But again, like your goal was to get that internship again and get that rising and that return offer, right? Or is it just like you're thinking about getting another internship somewhere else and eventually getting a return offer for that job?
Yeah, I think it would be awesome if I got a return internship, but
Okay.
if I couldn't, I think I just would like to stay in tech consulting.
Okay.
Um, my situation was kind of different because this is my first internship, and
Mm,
prior to this, my I did have a kind of an internship. I worked in a research lab,
mm,
so this was my first experience out of that kind of job where you are really self-led, and whatever you do affects you and your
mm,
project, and whether or not like you publish your paper or not. So I really enjoyed working in a more corporate environment and interacting with other people. And I think I fit into this mindset and the personality better. So yeah, I ideally would want to get a return offer just because I'm also really liking where I'm working right now.
okay.
But even if I don't, I know I want to stay in consulting. So it is again really beneficial for me to excel in this position.
Okay. Yeah, so that definitely actually gives me a lot more context because if this is your
Mhm.
first internship, do they know this is your first internship?
Yes, they do.
Okay, so that actually is even better because if you kill it, then they're like, okay, well, of course we're going to want you as for our intern next year. It would just considerably cut down a lot of recruiting time and hours as well. So I would
Hmm.
say that if you're killing it, and hopefully you are, and probably you are, then they would definitely give you one. But I think like again, I mentioned that they do go by usually growth. Like, are you growing over time?
Hmm.
And do you have potential to grow even more the next time around? And they may also be wondering, like, are you actually interested in what you're doing right now? Because they may give you an opportunity next time around of exploring a different part of technology consulting. Or maybe if you're not
Hmm.
even interested in what you're doing right now, that you could get the opportunity to try something else. If you are at a firm right now that does give different paths, like for example, you did mention one's a little bit more on the management consulting side or business side, and you said, yes, actually want to explore that, they may even allow you to honor that for the next time. Because if you're killing it right now in technology consulting and you want to explore that, then that gives you another option to say like, okay, well, if I like this job, I have two options now. I can't just like say, yeah, I want to go switch over to that side without showing that you have been successful there. So that is also another option that you could consider for next time around. And based off of that, your performance from this time can actually determine that. If maybe you
Hmm.
spoke to them and say like, oh, it would be great to, I love this firm, I loved my experience, and I would want to explore another place within the firm. Not guaranteed that I'll stick to that, but at least I want to learn a little bit more about it. That is also something to consider too, rather than just doing the same exact thing. But again, like with technology consulting, everything is like project based. So your same experience in technology consulting right now is not going to be the same as then. And in fact, it's actually going to be like almost like an elevation, because now you know how it's like. You didn't really learn how to use all the systems, you know, like, okay, what are the terminology and lingo, and even some people, you may have built a network already there. And actually, like, well, that's what that leads to one big tip that I have is really build your network. So
Hmm.
even though like you maybe spent the first 2 months to really say like, okay, I know how to deal with my emails, I know how to talk to my boss, I know the hierarchy or lack thereof, depending on your firm, and actually like know what to do with my job and on a day to day, what to expect. But like moving forward, you can also go, well, like now I want to see how do the parts actually work together. If, for example, in technology consulting, I only know what goes on in technology consulting, you can say like, how do you even get clients? You can start networking with people that have been trying to get clients. Or even on the management consulting side, how is it like
Hmm.
there? Because you never know how it's like until you ask people. But also, like, even if you're not on, if you're, I don't know, like, is your internship right now project based, or you're just like on a team that does everything?
It is kind of both. I actually
Okay.
got lucky because at the beginning of my internship, I expressed interest in interacting with the business
Okay.
facing side of things and also with just technology consulting.
Mm-hmm.
And I was given the opportunity to be involved with customer acquisition as well. So I worked on several projects on the presentation and
Mm-hmm.
figuring out a strategy and how to approach a client. So that was great. But I am also on a project right now where I just do development.
Okay.
So yeah, I just started on that project actually. So first 2 months it was kind of both. I did a little bit less, in fact, development and technology consulting. But now I would say like my main project is most of my time.
Okay. Yeah, I would actually say that is really good to hear, because most people, they're just like stuck on one project and that's all they've done. They didn't really
Hmm.
get that exposure to everything else. So networking can actually, if you're in that position where you're stuck in something, like right now you said you're mostly doing a project right now but not getting the other exposure. I would say if you do want to know like what's out there as well, and like what are the other projects out there other than what you're doing right now, maybe you don't want to do development in the future. Maybe you want to do more like functional consulting where you gather requirements and
Hmm.
work with the client even more. You can do networking and meet up with them, and then you'll learn a little bit more about the firm and the roles, and even like what projects are out there. Maybe there's something out there that you didn't know you were interested in until you heard them talk about their experience. And another thing is like in internship success, like I always like to say spheres of influence, like that's what a professor mentioned to me before. You want to get as much data points, or I wouldn't say data points, but like most people around you to say, yes, I love you, like I want you on the team, and I think there's room to grow. And a lot of times, like you could focus on people who are the decision makers, like HR, recruiters, and whatnot, or you can do your team, because most likely the team is going to reach out to them and say like, hey, would you recommend her to actually move on to the next time? Like, do you think we would see some room to grow? What are some room to improve? Do you think that room to improve could be done in another internship, or like, is it kind of something we can't deal with? Like, so that's like something that's really important, is just spreading your spheres of influence. If you're if you're like a bad candidate, like maybe you do spelling and typos and all those kind of things, then probably a little bit harder, because the more you spread out, the more negative influence you might get. So really, it's also something you need to do self-improvement on too. Like, I don't know like how you are with your work ethic or even the work you're doing, but trying to constantly learn and ask for feedback. That's another one too, is asking for feedback from the people who get your work. So not just your manager, but the people who you work with as well. So like, what kind of team member are you? Do you think like they're well supported? Do you feel like maybe that you're not putting in enough and you're just kind of observing? That also is like a good thing to ask about too. But I'm pretty sure like you knew about this as well. It seems like from your nods as well that you do. But you can go a little bit step further too, in terms of like, okay, how do good consultants do this? And then you can say like, okay, maybe like what I'm doing is enough for now just because of my level. But if you want to see like what you need to aim for, then you know like, okay, well, how do I even get there? That's like the part about networking too, is you can ask, how do I get to where this person is? Or how do I become the person that everyone would admire? And that way you can start to learn on like actually doing it during the internship, because you don't have the opportunity anywhere else other than like when you have the job or an internship. So if you're doing an internship where there's really nothing on out there, like if you fail, then it's okay, honestly, because they know that like you are there to try and learn and improve. If it was your job though, that's where it gets a little bit tricky, because you're supposed to do well and you're supposed to know that as well. So really like knowing what's out there, what you need to do to hit that bar. And even I hate to say this, but you may even want to compete with other full-time like consultants and say like, yeah, this is like a very similar situation where after you graduate, you'll be an underling. You'll be like literally after college, and then the clients will be like, who is this girl? Like, you just graduated. Why would I care about what you have to say? So this is something that you'll constantly be dealing with anyway. So you can say like, how do I get to that point? And you can try to beat them. I mean, that's a bad way to say it, but you can try to surpass them. And it's okay to actually mess up, because this is an internship. So if they do something that like, yeah, this is not something that would fly here, but you know, like we know we're trying to learn things around here and take risks. So this is the best time to take risk if you want.
Yeah, definitely. I think another thing, I realized that I struggle with, I don't know if this is the case with a lot of the interns, especially coming from like a more restricted experience as research. I often don't ask for feedback. I was struggling a lot with it. At the beginning, I started doing it more, where I ask if I did well. But one of the people I worked with, he actually provided me with feedback right after I delivered. And that was really useful. Then I knew, oh, I can actually do this.
Yeah.
Like the work I produce is actually good quality, because I think it's really hard to judge it just because you also don't know a lot when you come in. You don't know what a good proposal looks like. You don't know what a good like effective presentation looks like. And I think that was actually a really good thing to like point out, that asking for feedback is very important. And it's something I struggle with. I also feel uncomfortable just like going up to the people. I mean, like, how did I do? But it is actually shouldn't be that like uncomfortable, just because if you did well, then you did well. If you didn't do well, you're just an intern. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like a lot of times I say like, you know, ask for feedback, but then people like, how do we even get started? And I would say like, there's like many ways you can do this. And usually if you think you have, and I think like actually in general, I think if everyone should do this, it just kind of helps them a little bit, is asking, what did you do well in? And what do you need work on? If you just ask on what do you need work on, then you're just constantly feeling bad about yourself when they tell you this is what you need to do, and they give you like a laundry list of it, and like, well, now I feel really bad about myself. Did I even do a good job? Even if they say they did a good job. That's why I usually like to ask, what did you do well in as well? So you know that you can continue doing what you're doing, instead of just making guesswork of like, okay, I think they liked this, so I'm just going to continue, but really it could be something that they didn't even like in the first place. So you can ask them in a way like, how did I do? And then also, what do I need to improve on? And that way you can help your ego a little bit more and know what to continue on, because a lot of times you just kind of be like, well, I don't know what you're expecting. I'm just going to do what I think it works, but it may not be up to your level. So another one you can go for is just like asking, having like an actual weekly touch point with your manager or certain people that on your team that you work with directly a lot, and just have it as kind of like, this is during the time where I have all of my dumb questions. I ask them everything. So it could be something as stupid as, how does a actual sale process work? Maybe like what you're doing right now is project work, but you don't get that exposure. Maybe they don't even know the answer, honestly, too, but they could connect you to someone there. And knowing about everything, asking, having a time period we can ask about everything, you can set that actual level of trust where they'll start to be very honest with you. They'll know like, okay, you actually care about what you want to know and what you need to improve on. And sometimes, like, I think that there are, like, everyone says there's no such thing as a dumb question, but there are. It's always like, do you want to say the same question you've been asking every time? So you always want to give a reason why you're asking a question. If maybe you ask it again and you say in a way like, well, I didn't really catch what you said last time. I did, and which is basically saying you didn't pay attention or you didn't take notes. Don't say something like that. If anything, I would BS it in a way with like, okay, well, last time you mentioned this, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Elaborate on it. And it's just like a smarter way of saying something, even if it just meant you don't know anything. Being even that, like, I mean, that's a skill that you're going to learn, but if, over time, it will be something you can just easily ask in a way that doesn't sound like you're being dumb or anything like that, or that you didn't pay attention. But that kind of, those questions of feedback are very important too, where if you felt like, oh no, like I remember that time I did this presentation and he didn't like this one thing, but I forgot what that one thing was. You can just ask and say like, hey, like I'm doing the presentation again. You did mention something about this and I just wanted to recall exactly like why was that important. Again, it wasn't like what was it, it was just why was it important, is a little bit of elaboration there. And that way you can even see a different way where maybe before they were like, yeah, it's just like too distracting to the client to do these custom animations on the PowerPoint. And then the other part is like, you're learning the why factor now, is that while they're saying the why, you'll understand what they said what about. So it's just like a little different way of rephrasing it. And it's not even something you learn over time, like with your team. It's also what you work with your client. Once you get a little bit smarter and savvy about what to say and what to ask, you'll learn a little bit more about everything without sounding too dumb. Because like we always deal with this all the time. We're like, what did they say? And then they don't remember what to say. So we ask it in a different way. So I would say that that definitely is another way to do it, is having that baseline every week. You have a session where you ask all the dumb questions. And typically I like to do it with someone who's not the manager. So you don't feel judged. You want to feel someone who's like, if you're interning, doing something with the team, you're basically like your colleague that isn't another intern, someone who's actually working with you, not working like under you or over you. That person's a good person to talk to, because then you know how exactly they think and you're also on the same level too. So it's not like you're asking questions about how would you do a presentation. It's more about like, tell me about it, like how you did the presentation. So it's more centered on them rather than what is the best way to do it. And that way you can see like, what did they learn? You learn from their mistakes, because I think the higher you go or the lower you go, they just deal with different problems and they may not even remember, or they just don't know how to like speak in your words. So those are the two main ways I would do it. Is like, one is just having like asking what is for good feedback, what is some bad feedback, and then working on that so that way you don't feel so bad about yourself. And then the other one is like having that baseline of honesty and trust, that like this way, anytime you have anything you want to ask for feedback, you'll get that. And it won't be like, okay, I know that you can't handle sugarcoating, or I know that like this would be hurting your feelings. But if you set that from the very beginning, you'll set that tone that they'll give you everything that they ask you for.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. I think in my company, it was structured pretty well, that I have one senior consulting who I directly interact with.
Nice.
And it was just suggested that we meet every once, like 2 weeks. So we have that kind of conversation, but it's usually just not asking feedback. But I can see him actually thinking the same way you do, because last time we met, he was asking me what is the feedback I would give to the company and him and the work I've been doing and what I think I did. And I straight up told him that I think at the beginning I was very slow, and I was approaching it as it is just solely dependent on me, and I was delivering slowly, not asking questions.
Yeah.
And I realized quickly that it's okay to ask questions. In fact, you should ask questions if
Yeah.
it means you would deliver the work in time and good quality versus just taking your time, and it might be something they don't even want.
Yeah.
Or it might be that like maybe you completely misunderstood the task and you took 2 days with it, then you have to start again, right? That was the thing I struggled with actually, and it was a nice time to learn about it and address that. So I truly believe that's a really good tip. Yeah.
All right. So I think like moving forward, some other tips that I would want to provide is, I mean, like I did mention, ask for feedback, networking. Also, I don't know how much of an opportunity you've had to do this before, but is everything that you're doing right now virtual?
Yes.
Okay.
I only been to the office twice. I don't know if you heard about the heat wave in Pacific Northwest. It was so hot here for like a week, so I just went to the office to use air conditioning. But I was some other than that.
Okay. Yeah, so I would say actually succeeding in an internship virtually is way harder, in my opinion, because now it's just before you just have a feeling of like, yeah, during the coffee break or during when you go to the water cooler time where you go meet up with people, or you just literally walk up to people's offices, they'll see your face and they'll know like, okay, yeah, I know her. Yeah, she does good job. She like brings us smile to the office all the time. Now it's just completely shut out. Like only the people that you're on a call with right now will know about you. And that's why I say networking is very important. And it's not just like the way of learning about the company. Sometimes it's actually just literally talking to them and getting your face out there. So if you want to start talking to maybe people that are not even in your area, but I would, for this particular area, I would talk about specifically meeting with people in that area, because you want to make sure they know your face. Maybe talking to like the managing director or partner, and just like, I mean, straight up say, yes, you're an intern, you have a lot of questions again, and you really appreciate the time that they would be able to give you if they did end up offering, actually like honoring this call. If they do the call, like even better, definitely come prepared with questions, and or even some conversation starters too, if it's not just questions as well. So that way, like they know like, okay, I know she's ambitious, I know she can do this. Even if they haven't seen your work or know about you, they know like, okay, you're actually trying to make an effort, compared to if you were in person and you just walk by the VP. And I mean, the VP can always make some assumptions of you, like, oh, she's not dressed properly, she's always drinking coffee, she's always late to her call, you see her like taking her books and running around. Like that's like the assumption they can make. But for you, you need to make that assumption yourself. Like you can't wait for them to come to you. I mean, like a lot of companies, if they do that, that's great because that's great culture. But when it's virtual, it's so hard to do that. You need to kind of go beyond the people that you work with, but specifically for the purpose of just getting your face out there. Because if you were to be on a project next time around, they'll know like, oh, I remember her. She was amazing. Like I would want to work with her. Even if I haven't seen her work, then they want you on the project instead. And that can actually really help, because next time around, if you want that return internship, they'll know like, oh yeah, we have a spot open for an internship. We have like an opportunity, but they'll know about you. But if they have like 5 other people who are open and available for an internship opportunity, they're gonna be like, I don't even know them, so I'm gonna go with someone I'm familiar with, compared to just like 5 random people. I'm like, I don't even know any of them. Just give me a person I don't even know. And they'll go by the credentials. And if you don't have the best credentials or the best interview skills, you pretty much suck. So really like getting your face out there just for the sake of meeting people, regardless of like learning about the company, that's also really important, especially trying to get a return offer as an intern.
Yeah, definitely. I also think it was really helpful in terms of learning more about what goes into consulting, just because I never knew about tech consulting before. It was my first time, and it was actually my first time, but I specifically work on cloud technologies, and it was my first time learning about cloud. And I think it was also useful to just ask people, oh, I'm interested in what specifically what you're doing. Let's say that data visualization, or they do a lot of data engineering, and bothering them about it. And what would you say is the best way of learning this? because I'm interested in this.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's also easy to open that door to make personal connections by just
Yeah.
expressing interest in what they do.
Yeah.
But yeah, especially when you're an intern, right? Because they will like that that you like what they do, and also they expect you to not know anything, so you
Yeah.
can't really sound stupid when you
Yeah.
are asking them
Exactly.
questions.
And if you are in a good position where they actually allow you to do training as an intern and they're willing to give you the actual budget for that, definitely do it because it's going to be very expensive if you did that on your own. So if your
Yeah.
firm allows you to do that training as part of your internship, I mean, like, of course, if it's not related to your internship, then you want to make sure it's outside of your hours. But if they allow it, then that's great. But highly recommend. I mean, like, that's one of the reasons why you want to do an internship is like, do you even like what you're doing? And if you don't, like, what are the options out there and how can you get there? Because if you, like I mentioned before, don't like what you're doing now, but maybe the next internship around you want to explore something else, showing the
Mm-hmm.
fact that you're actually training and you're doing something about it is going to be like a lot better of like, yeah, we want you, rather than just like, yeah, I want it, but you do absolutely nothing. Don't even say that you're doing anything. Like, even if you're doing something outside of work, I wouldn't even say it to your manager or to consultants there, so they know you're doing something even if you're not doing something work related. So that way they know, like, yeah, you're constantly working on it and you're actually trying to get better, because a lot of interns are just like, I'm just going to do the job and hopefully I get something. But if you do something outside of work, which is even harder because you're doing that on top of your hours, they're going to be like, wow, so impressed, and then they're going to want you for the next time around. So it is, I think, like, you're still pretty young, but a lot of people, they still struggle with personal branding. And I think, like, from what you're saying, have already established some kind of personal brand at your firm about, like, you are this person who's constantly learning, what you're at fault with, and you're learning to grow. That is something that you really want to hone in on. And it's great that you've already set that up as a reputation there, because that's what they're looking for in an intern. And also as a consultant, regardless, you still
Mm-hmm.
constantly have to be learning. You can't be like, oh, I know everything, so I'm perfect for the project. Like, no, it's like, really, who's the best learner, who's the best student will be the best for the job, because then you'll learn. So I would definitely say grow your personal brand. And I think, like, you've been doing a great job about that. But for anyone who's listening, don't just do the work that your manager gives you. Actually try to grow your brand. Figure out, like, what are your strong points on. If your strong points is on research, show off that you do really good research. If your strong points numbers and technology, show it off as well. I think a lot of times, especially when it comes virtually too, a lot of times, like, you just, here's my work, and then they don't know what you did. They just like, okay, fine, and then just put in their, like, slide deck, or they just send it to the client after reviewing it. But sometimes you need to literally tell them, this is what I did and this is what happened, so that way they know, like, oh wow, you actually did a lot. They didn't know that, like, maybe the data that they provided was not clean, so you had to clean it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're going to be thinking, like, well, you spent 3 days on this, like, why was it taking long? But at least I got the end product. But if you tell them and literally, like, almost make it as a mission to say exactly what happened for a reason of telling them, then they were like, okay, wow, I guess, like, I really learned how to do this, and I didn't know that the data wasn't clean or anything like that. And that can actually add to your personal brand, that, like, you've worked on it. But again, this is, like, also asking for feedback too, and reverse, like, actually asking, well, not reverse, like, what am I trying to say? Not just asking for feedback, but
Yeah.
giving feedback in terms of,
Mm-hmm.
this is what I'm dealing with, like, your actual, a little bit of a touch point of, like, this is what I'm doing and I'm going to get this done by this time. And that's a communication, is basically what I'm trying to say. So
Yeah,
communicating that
definitely.
as well. So it's not just you giving the work, you want to communicate the value that you added.
Yeah, that's actually really important. Like, I never noticed that, actually, that I just deliver work and I never say like what I did. And sometimes I do more than what was
Yeah.
asked.
Yeah.
Or there's sometimes like problems with it and I go research and I figure it out my own. But then maybe they don't think I did that.
Exactly.
So I think that's a really good point. Yeah, just giving maybe like a summary of
Mm-hmm.
what you did when you delivered the work. It's like, oh, I had to go search this up because like virtual machine that didn't work
Mm-hmm.
or something. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's really important to do that.
Yeah, and it's actually
Yeah.
something that is not intuitive to us, because we're like, why would I want to brag about my problems? But you want to show, like, what kind of work you've done. And then maybe, like, if they have a questionnaire at the end of your internship, like, show data analysis skills. And maybe what you've done is just like, here's a report. well, I don't know if you have done it or not. Maybe you've just like Googled it or researched it. But if you literally said, oh, this is the data point I got, and then this is what we were trying to get, right? So this is like my thought process behind it. So also this is very important too when it comes to consulting too, is like when they do have these client meetings, they're just like, okay, I don't even know how this came to be. They're gonna asking about like, where'd you get this number? How'd you get to this? And actually knowing the thought process behind it too can help them, even if they didn't ask for it. Having them actually, I mean, telling them what you thought about it and what you did can help. So for example, if they gave me bad data and I'm like, let's say for example, an intern, and they gave me bad data, and I cleaned it, I made it into good data, and then I actually used it to do data analysis. Then we had the presentation, and then they're just like, yeah, the data we got was great. Like, this is the result we got. But that wasn't the case. They wanted to know exactly what happened because they want to prevent it for the next time around. So you actually help them do a better job by telling them what happened so you can mitigate that problem from later on. So it goes two ways. Is like, one is that they'll like know about like what you were dealing with and can know a little bit more about like what kind of work you've been doing and what kind of process you've been going through, which is great, and showing a little humble brag of what you've been doing. The other thing is that you'll actually kind of help them figure out moving forward, like what is something they need to take in consideration for the next time around, and help train the next people. Because even though you're an intern, like most likely after you, there's going to be another person that takes over your place, that then they're gonna be like, oh shoot, no one told me that this was going to be like this. So it's always very important to have that communication.
Yeah, definitely. I also think it's like what you do when you do case studies, basically, but you're doing it in a job. So
yeah,
like, just explaining your thought process shouldn't be that hard.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I also think that in my experience, I interacted with the people I interacted with in several different projects. So I actually had the chance to make off a more impression. But you mentioned to like it's important to reach out to people that you wouldn't interact otherwise as well, to let them know of you at least. What would be a good way to go about that? If I am reaching out to someone that I don't know what they do.
Yeah.
Let's say they're like a client acquisition person. I don't know what it is even. How would I approach to that person and introduce myself and also learn from them?
Yeah. So this is I mean, I don't know the situation at your firm, but it's also virtual, so it's even harder. But so I would say that there's like two ways you can do this. Like, one is that if you were to reach out to someone virtually, it's so much harder because you need to really be upfront with like, yeah, I am interested. Talk to your manager first about this, because you want to ask, is it okay to? A lot of firms, they may not be okay with it just because they want you to prioritize the work that you're doing right now. But then if they are okay with it, which most, if they have good culture, they would definitely highly recommend you to do that anyways, then they'll probably tell you about, oh, I do know this person in client acquisition, and then they'll connect you to that person. So that way it's a lot less awkward than if you cold called and reached out to them. And I think virtually as well is a little bit weird because you do just like either ping them on your whatever like messaging software your firm uses, or you send an email and they may just ignore you because they don't know your name, and they probably prioritize like the client information or the client meetings and all the team meetings over like a random person. So generally, if you know someone between the two of you, like if there's a mutual person, have them send the email and then CC you, no, have them email them, but CC you, and they will introduce you, talking about the situation of like, yeah, she's an intern. She would love to learn about this. She has absolutely no clue. And it's a lot better than just randomly pinging this person. It's like, yeah, I would love to learn about what you're doing. But if you don't really have that situation and you don't know who knows who, then you can definitely just like message them and ping them. Ask them like if you, I mean, depends on what you want to do. If you want to do a video call, or if you want to do a like just messaging on like whatever text or just emailing, but highly recommend to at least like say, can I have like a 15-minute coffee chat? Does not take that much time. And I just wanted to really dig deep into like what you do, because as an intern, I don't know anything. And actually really having a good subject title is good too, because like when we go through emails, that's the first thing we look at. So put your name at the top as well. Like even though your name is on there, said like coffee chat about blah, 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 dash your name. And that could be really helpful too, for it to be like, okay, well, it's not just a random coffee chat from a random girl. That way they'll just know like to tag that person to you. So the other one is that if you were in person, who, whenever you're watching this, if it is in person, I don't know. Actually, it's great to go to those networking events. If like, even virtually, actually, there's a virtual happy hour or a like, I don't know, a birthday party or some kind of event where it's virtual, you can start messaging and talking to that person as well. That's a great way. I think in person, that was like the best way for me to meet someone, actually, was during those kind of virtual, not virtual, like happy hours where I met them in person. And I would just say like, hey, what do you do on a daily basis? And I mean, most times people don't want to talk about work when you're at the kind of situation. So, but that is a good time to just connect and like, hey, can I send you over like like a meeting invite next week to talk about your job a little bit? But at least they know you from your face in that kind of setting. So any virtual or in-person social setting events, like I would go there just to make connections and talk to people. And if there's like someone that you know that you want to talk to is going to that event, make that as like a thing you can do to talk to them specifically if you can. So that way it's not just like a random cold call. They'll be like, oh yeah, she's the girl that I met at that event. And it will be a little bit easier than just a random person emailing you and like, I don't even know who this person is.
Yeah, definitely. I think my company did a good job of introducing me to people that I wouldn't get introduced otherwise.
Yeah.
When I first joined, the first 2 weeks, I just had one-on-ones with basically people from every like part
Yeah.
of the company. I
That's
had
great.
like a one-on-one with like business people and
Mm-hmm.
not just like data scientists or
Mm-hmm.
software engineers, which was great. But I feel the need of doing that more now
Mm.
versus when I first joined. Because when I first joined, I would just ask very generic questions
Yeah.
versus now I really have an idea of what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I have ideas of what they might be doing. And it's
Mm-hmm.
great to talk about those too. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you don't know what kind of questions to ask, you can always start open ended. You don't have to go like, oh, do you do this? And then now, like, they say no. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, well, now what, what do I say? Because I planned all my questions off of that. So sometimes you can ask open ended questions of like, how did you get to where you are? Like,
Mm-hmm.
for what makes a good blank, like whatever their job title is, and what did they like about the firm? What do you think they can improve about it? And then ask, like, I wouldn't prepare follow-up questions, but those follow-up questions will come up as they say something interesting or different than what you expected. So that way you can't really fail. If you go, oh, data scientist, like, do you actually code? And they say no, I'm like, well, now I'm at a dead end. Every question I had was about coding. Then now what do I say? But that's where you can go a little bit more further. That's actually what consultants do. Like, we ask open-ended questions. We don't know what answers we're getting, but based off of what they say from one or the other, we can ask like, okay, I'm going to follow up a little bit more on that, or maybe I'm going to learn about that. And sometimes like doing this can actually help you learn the power of BS, where you can actually just go, okay, well, that would be great to know. And you probably didn't really need to say that, but at least like you'll know, like, that's a good way to buy time to figure out the next
Yeah.
question. I do that all the time, even when I don't really need it. I mean, you should need it. Like, it's good to be genuine, but that's a skill you're going to learn over time. And that's what I would say is like, ask open-ended questions. And what I actually did in the past was I have a block of questions that are open-ended that I ask every person in the firm. So it's not really like I changed my questions for everyone. And then the second block is specific to what I've heard about this person. If that person was connecting me to someone else, then that person that connected me, I'd ask, what do they do in the first place? So I get some kind of context instead of going in cold turkey or going in
Mm-hmm.
blind. And then asking them like, okay, like what kind of background? And sometimes I even go on their LinkedIn and stalk them a little bit. So I know like at least I did my research of like, oh, I saw you did studying computer science. How helpful was that in your field? Or something about like, oh, I see you were in the firm for 10 years. How was that? How have you
Mm-hmm.
seen the firm grow? And that is like, doing your research, you can probably get so many questions off of that and get different answers, different type of questions that were not the basic questions you get for everywhere else. But you could still ask your basic questions because everyone's different. Their answers could be different anyways.
Yeah, definitely. Also, what would you say is a good way of figuring out what is potentially another area that I might want to go into? Let's say like in my next internship, because
Mm-hmm.
right now I'm doing cloud, and mostly just data, but
Mm-hmm.
let's say I want to explore something else, and I know there are people who do it, but how do I go about like figuring that out?
How do you figure out that you like that
Um,
field, or how do you talk to them?
yeah, So like, should I just first talk to them? And because I also don't know like what most people do outside of my team,
Yeah.
or like who those people are, what are some other teams that work on like other stuff. I can just go to the website, but then it's not really telling me about the office that I work at, right? Like I don't know what are
Okay.
some teams like working on right now where I am.
Yeah, so I think like a good way to do that is really meeting up with managing directors. I know it's this, I actually no, that's not a good first step. That's like a later step. Um, how close are you with the other interns, and are they doing different things within the firm? I know you said there's
One
only
of
one other technology consulting intern, so it
Yeah,
probably wasn't a good picture in the first place.
yeah. But I am actually close with my managing director.
Okay, yeah, that would be a really good way to first ask what are the things out there to begin with, because as a managing director, they need to know this to know if this area is suffering, if this project needs a little bit of work, then they'll know like, okay, you can talk to this person, talk to this person, talk to this person. If you build a relationship with that managing director, you can even say things like, oh, what I like about my current role or like my current job or what I want to have that I'm not getting is this, and that. Do you think that I fall into anything outside of what I'm doing right now, skills aside, because you can always learn that? And they can actually give a recommendation of like, oh, I think you'd be a pretty good fit for AI, or I think you're a good fit for UX design just based off of what you like in the job. It will be very open-ended. It's not like, oh, I like coding. It's really more about like, I like leadership. I like something new. I like working with the client. I mean, those are very generic, but then once you mention something like, I like working with the user experience, and like, okay, well, you can do UX, even if you didn't know what that field was in the first place, they can tell you, because I'm managing director, I hope so at least, is like very fine-tuned with everything within the office, rather than like maybe a different office does this and then now like you're saying like, well, that means I have to transfer, right, to do what you just said. But if you have it in a way where you talk to just a managing director, build that relationship, tell them exactly what you like and what you want to do in the future, and this is like something that will evolve all the time. So if you find out you like something else, then they might say like, oh, you know, that field over there would be great too. And one great thing about being the fact that they're a managing director, they can easily connect you. Maybe the next time around, actually, your next internship, you can do that, because they are probably the ones calling the shots of like, yeah, I want her back for the internship, or like, oh, maybe this intern should go there, this intern should go there. But then knowing the prior conversations they have with you, they will put you in the part that you want, or they think that you'll succeed in. So really talking to someone, I think like talking to the right people, not everyone's going to have that connection with the managing director. But if like, let's say, for example, you need to talk to someone who's like the head of tech or head of staffing for that office, most likely they'll know something, because that's their job. They need to know what goes well with that. So I think like for you, you're actually at a pretty good position to talk to the managing director and say like, but it's also really important to just not say like what's out there, because you might go like, what's blockchain? What kind of product are there? And then you'll spend too much time talking to that person in blockchain. But it's a better way to just go, I like to be creative. I like working with numbers. I like to be technical. What are some paths that you would recommend that I could do at this office in the future, either during my internship or in another internship for the next time around?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think I'm lucky just because where I work has a great company culture that I can just go to the managing director. But I think just like going to other interns would be also better for people who might work in bigger firms. And it's not that easy to get hold of people higher up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like
also,
sorry, go on.
Oh, you can. I was just gonna ask another question, so you can.
Oh, I was just going to say, for those who don't really have a firm that doesn't have a good company culture, honestly, if you can't even do something like that, just ask why. Is it because of time? Is it because they just like, well, I don't care about interns? I mean, they're not going to say that, but you can make that assumption. So that is where it's going to get tricky, because if like, let's say, for example, it's your dream firm and you're like, I would love to learn about this, talking to the managing director, but the managing director doesn't want to even give you the time of day for that, then it's a little bit harder to figure out what you want to do then. So you just have to go a little bit lower than maybe like senior manager or like another person out there that would know it. But again, it's always something to think about, is like, even though maybe the dream job at your dream company is not really the dream company you thought about it, you don't have to stick with the dream company. In that case, you can actually go outside of your firm, and then actually talk to people and say like, hey, what do you think works for me? Maybe it will be like another person in another firm, probably in the same comparable position that you were going to talk to, is say, what do you think would work for me? And now you like expanded your networking to other firms too. So I also have like a interview, I mean, I also had a coaching session on with Luke as well, talking about this with like networking inside and outside of an internship and how do you navigate that. So link is down below. So all right. What was your next question? Sorry if I for cutting you off.
Yeah, I remember you talked about this actually, but just to like get more feedback on like my situation.
Yeah,
it's really hot here. I'm sticking to the chair. Yeah,
me too.
Yeah, I was gonna ask for especially people like me who's maybe going on to their second or third year of university. How do you maintain those connections once you're back to school? I don't want people to forget about me next time I'm applying for the summer. But I feel like it will be harder to have those kind of conversations just because I cannot refer to like a current project or specifically what I want to learn about once I'm in school.
All right. So do you have anyone right now that you feel generally close enough that you talk about like what you did over the weekend, or is everything like strictly professional and work related right now?
I would say I have a couple of people that I work on projects with. So
okay. So I would say that after the project is over, depending on if you got that, I mean, either way, like if you didn't get that return offer, I would still say, what is the best way to reach out to you? Maybe they prefer to actually not have it over through like your like work email. Maybe they do prefer like over LinkedIn or personal email actually as well. So doing that is really important to know. Okay, I would love to reach out to you after this internship, and really do follow up, because I think like what hurts the most is a lot of people like, yeah, I would love to follow up, and they never do. And they're like, well, you didn't deliver what you said. You actually should reach out to them. And because of that, I would actually stay pretty organized. And I did actually interview Brianna Califano, who talked about how to succeed in an internship. She had an Excel sheet of every person she spoke to, either through email or Teams, Microsoft Teams, or a call. And then from that, I even put down what was the last thing they talked about. So there was like some kind of CRM system there on, okay, next time I talk to this person, I know like to use this conversation starter, like, oh, how was your son? Did they enjoy camp, kind of thing? Like it's a little bit more of a real client experience there. And because of that, she was able to stay very organized and know exactly every person she spoke to. And at one point, she reached out to them after the internship was over as well, and followed up and said like, hey, how is it going? And help. And people, they like I said before, you can ask them what's the best way to communicate. It's not always going to be their work email. I think actually I wouldn't even like their work email, because if they left the firm after that and you're like, you emailed and you really want to keep that connection, now all of a sudden you're stuck, because it's just going to get a bounce back and say like, this email address no longer exists. So I would actually recommend getting either like asking, do you prefer LinkedIn or social media accounts, if they are okay with that, in their personal email, so that way you can connect regardless of their employer. Because let's say, for example, you do like that firm, but you didn't get an internship there, but the person you worked with, let's say your manager, has moved on to another firm and there's an internship available there. So now like, how do you make that connection if you didn't know that other way to communicate with that person? So if you had the work email, you would have been stuck. Like that connection would have been severed the moment they left. So having a personal email address is great. And like, I would say try to limit who you speak to the most. I know I say play the numbers game, just like spread it out and everything, but the people that you really, really, really want to follow up with, actually that you can manage to follow up with, try to do something like maybe once a month, have a call every other month. So for example, I had an internship where I reached out to two people who I worked directly with, like I wasn't reporting to them, and they're also in New York too. I've actually met up with them for dinner and drinks like 3 other times after I left that company. So that was a good way too. Again, it wasn't through their work email, and actually one of them have left that firm. So that's how I knew like, okay, I'm going to use Facebook and message them. And all of a sudden, like you see that change completely, because they're not going to act the same way they do in a work email than personally. And for that reason, they have definitely been opening up a lot more about their experience and even connecting me with other people. So I would say reach out to people that you only really want to talk to as friends. Like if I were to be a friend with them or a personal connection, but don't say it specifically for the reason that they work there. I would say like, oh, I would love to keep in touch with you. I loved working with you. I want to see like what else is out there, like in terms of like what, like maybe they have a wedding coming up. I'm just like, I would love to see those wedding photos and like, and connect with them there. So usually, like I mentioned with Brianna's little Excel sheet, like what did you guys last talk about? What was a big point? So something as simple as, can I connect with you on Facebook or Instagram? You mentioned that you're going to get married. I would love to see those wedding photos. Not work related, but it's a good way to kind of keep in touch with them outside of work. So that is one way you can definitely do it. And I highly recommend connecting with them personally, as long as you're okay with sharing your personal information, because some people have like bikini photos they don't want to share.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good point. Just because like there are people that I talk to, but it's just in like a strictly professional setting, but I feel like I would get along also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have something like that where you think there's potential, but you just haven't had the time, you can actually still do like a phone call afterwards, like maybe 2, 3 weeks after you ended, or maybe a lot later, but ask for an email address. If you think like you're a little bit closer to that person, I would ask like maybe if you prefer Facebook or Instagram, or I don't know what other Twitter, maybe, then ask that. And that way it's a little bit, it's sometimes a little bit hard because maybe some people are like, well, I still don't want to give it to you, even though we feel close, because they have a very strong work-life balance there. But it always doesn't hurt to ask. So that's like something I would say is like, if you really want to get to that point, start easy with an email address or a phone call or anything like that. And then if you think that you've really gone close enough to be that person, like, oh, can we connect on social media? Then you can do that as well. But again, it's just like, you got to feel it out and see which one they would be more comfortable with, or what do you be more comfortable with.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's like one thing I feel like is important to address now that I'm approaching the end of my internship. This is going to be my last month, and how do I maintain those connections is important now.
All right. So did that help answer a lot of your questions? I know like a lot of it was on internship success. Okay.
Yeah. I also remember the video you had with Brianna, and I think it overlaps a bit.
Yeah. So. All right. So I hopefully you got a lot of value from this, and anyone that's watching or listening to this, if you would also like a free coaching call as well and be on the YouTube or podcast episode as well, so other people can help and get benefits from this, definitely check out the link below. And I'm so happy that you were able to show up here and give a lot of value for other people as well. I'm pretty sure a lot of other people are having the same issues, but don't know what questions to ask, or just didn't know how to ask it in a way that is like absolutely judgment free. So thank you so much for being here, and see you next time.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me and answering all the questions I have. This was really helpful.
Perfect. And good luck with everything. I really hope you get that return offer. I mean, like just like if you had this relationship with every other person that you did coffee chat with, I think you get it. I think you get the offer.
Hopefully. I really like consulting. I think it was something that I didn't consider getting into before, just because I study engineering. Yeah. And it is very different. I'm in a machine shop like half of the day, then switching to like a business facing role. But I love it, and I really like the company. So I will definitely use all these tips.
That's a great mix. I think like a lot of people who are not as fortunate, maybe they don't like consulting, or maybe they don't like the firm. Sometimes it's really just changing what you're doing. Like I think like you can still stay in consulting, but if you change the firm, sometimes your experience can drastically change, because the culture can really actually make an impact on your experience on consulting. Like let's say, for example, you went into consulting thinking you can try all these new projects, but maybe you went into a firm where the actual culture is like, no, you stay on this project. This is what the client wants. You're stuck here. Sometimes like you'll be stuck in a culture like that where it's not exactly what you're thinking, but it definitely is out there going to be like that. So that's why I highly recommend networking and going to the technology consulting community, learning about other people's experience, because maybe it's not typical. Maybe like what you're thinking actually is what you want, but you just are not in the right place. So again, that's why an internship is so helpful for that, to see, is the firm the right place? Is the career the right place? And always like, it's all about networking too, because you can also network to go to another place and then see for that as well. So I think that like hopefully a lot of people have benefited from this video or podcast episode, however you're listening and watching this. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having
Great.
me again.
Thank you.